Imagine this. You've packed your entire life into a moving truck. You've driven hundreds of miles. Your animals are in kennels in the backseat. Your new job starts Monday. And when you finally pull up to your new home, the lights are on inside. The curtains shift, and a woman answers the door. She doesn't work for the property management company. She doesn't have a work order. She lives there, and she has kids. That is exactly what happened to one Pennsylvania family. And what unfolded next exposed a fraud scheme so brazen it left two innocent families fighting over the same front door. Here is the full story. Our story begins in western Pennsylvania, just outside Pittsburgh. A couple, we'll call them the Harpers, were relocating to the area for work. Like millions of renters every year, they used a licensed property management company to find their new home. They paid a security deposit through verified official channels. They signed a standard multi-page lease. The property owner listed on public records matched exactly the entity they paid. By every reasonable measure, the Harpers did everything right. The management company had other properties in the area. Their office operated Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Not the most responsive operation in the world, but legitimate. And legitimacy, as we will see in this case, is everything. Because without that paper trail, without those verified payment records, the Harpers' entire legal position collapses. Keep that in mind. Moving day arrived, the truck was loaded. Pets were secured in kennels. The couple drove to the property, key in hand, ready to start their new chapter. What they found instead was a lived-in home, furniture arranged, photos on walls, food in the kitchen, children's toys on the floor, and a woman who had absolutely no intention of leaving. This was not a maintenance mix-up. This was not a scheduling error. Something had gone very, very wrong. Now, before we assign blame here, this is where the story becomes genuinely complicated. Because the woman living in that house, let's call her Sandra, was not a traditional squatter. She hadn't broken a window or picked a lock. She had a lease. She had payment records. She had a contact number for her supposed landlord. Sandra, by every available piece of evidence, was also a victim. Sandra had found her rental on Facebook Marketplace. Right there, red flag number 1. The listing looked like a deal. The rent was listed at $800 per month, plus $500 for utilities. In a suburban Pittsburgh neighborhood where comparable homes routinely rent for $1,500 to $2,000 a month. Red flag number 2. When something is priced 30 to 40% below market value, there is almost always a reason. And that reason is rarely good news for the tenant. Her lease was a single page. Not the standard multi-page document a licensed property management company produces, the kind with clauses about maintenance requests, pet policies, and dispute resolution. Just one page. Her supposed landlord's name appeared nowhere in any public property record, and her monthly rent payments, they didn't go to any verified management company. They went to an individual, a fraudster who had constructed an elaborate lie and was collecting Sandra's money every single month. So let's be precise about what we are actually looking at here. The Harpers paid a licensed, verified management company. Sandra paid a con artist. The management company held the legal deed. The con artist owned absolutely nothing. 2 families, 2 leases, 1 house, and one very calculated scheme that left both parties standing in a doorway, staring at each other with nowhere to go. What would you do in that moment? Because here is what many people would do wrong in this moment: take matters into their own hands. Change the locks. Move Sandra's belongings to the curb. Demand she leave immediately. And I want to be very direct with you. Any of those actions would have turned the Harpers from victims into defendants. The law on this is strict, and it does not care how righteous your anger is. Let's talk about what the law actually says. In Pennsylvania, and in most states, physical possession of a property, combined with a lease agreement, even a fraudulent one, creates what attorneys call a colorable claim to occupancy. That's a legal phrase meaning Sandra has enough of an apparent claim to require a formal legal process to remove her. She cannot simply be told to leave and expected to comply without consequences if she refuses. This leads to one of the most important concepts in landlord-tenant law, the prohibition on self-help eviction. Self-help eviction means taking direct physical action to remove a tenant, locking them out, removing their belongings, shutting off utilities. Pennsylvania law expressly forbids it, even when the occupant is there illegally. A property owner or legitimate tenant who uses self-help eviction can face civil liability for damages. Courts take this seriously. The Harpers were correct to call police rather than act unilaterally. Now let's talk about the fraud itself, because this is a pattern the FBI has been tracking for years. The scheme is called phantom rental fraud. A bad actor finds a vacant or soon-to-be vacant property, lifts photos from legitimate listings, creates a fake advertisement, often on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, collects deposits and first month's rent, sometimes multiple months, then vanishes. The FBI estimates rental fraud costs American renters over $200 million annually. And the victims are overwhelmingly working-class families who can least afford to lose that money. When the Harpers called police, officers responded promptly. They took statements. They verified Sandra's identity, her contact information checked out, her face matched photos they confirmed with her. And then the officers did something that frustrated the Harpers enormously. They left, without removing Sandra, without forcing a resolution. And that decision was completely correct under Pennsylvania law. Without a civil court order for eviction, police in Pennsylvania cannot physically remove an occupant from a residence, even if that occupant has no legal right to be there. This is a civil matter, not a criminal one, at least not at this stage. The officers could document the situation. They could note that Sandra had apparently vacated temporarily before their arrival, leaving her belongings behind, and they could flag it for follow-up. But their hands were legally tied when it came to immediate removal. Meanwhile, every hour that passed cost the Harpers real money. Hotel bills were mounting. Their rental truck, a moving vehicle that charges daily overage fees, sat immobile in a parking lot at roughly $50 to $80 per day in late fees. Their pets were confined to kennels in the vehicle, unable to stay at the hotel. They could not start their new jobs. Their entire life was in suspension. This is the hidden cost of rental fraud. It isn't just the scam victim who suffers. The ripple effects damage everyone in the chain. When the Harpers reached the property management company's emergency maintenance line, they got their first real break. The company acknowledged what they almost certainly already knew. They had a breach of contract problem. When a licensed management company fails to deliver a property in vacant, habitable condition on the agreed move-in date, that is a textbook breach of lease agreement. The Harpers had legal leverage, and a smart management company knows that a breach of contract lawsuit from a documented victim costs far more than an emergency relocation. By the following morning, the management company offered a solution: relocation to a comparable property in the area. It wasn't perfect. The available house was more expensive and, by the Harpers' own account, noticeably less desirable than what they had originally contracted for. But it was empty, it was accessible, and it resolved the immediate housing crisis. For now, the Harpers had shelter. Sandra, however, remained in the original property with her children, her belongings, and a ticking legal clock. Let's walk through what a formal resolution of Sandra's situation looks like under Pennsylvania law. The property management company must first serve Sandra with a written notice to quit, a formal legal document demanding she vacate the property. For unauthorized occupants in Pennsylvania, this notice period is typically 10 days. If Sandra does not leave voluntarily within those 10 days, the company files a complaint in the local magisterial district court, the lowest level of Pennsylvania's court system, which handles landlord-tenant matters. At the court hearing, Sandra's story would absolutely matter. Pennsylvania judges are human beings. An occupant who was defrauded, who paid real rent in good faith, who has minor children at home, who is now facing homelessness through no fault of her own, that is not the same as someone who broke into a property and refused to leave. Courts have discretion to grant additional time for relocation, particularly when children are involved. But make no mistake about the legal endpoint: she cannot legally remain. The question is only how much time the court provides. And the fraudster, they face a very different kind of reckoning. Rental fraud in Pennsylvania is prosecuted under the state's criminal fraud statutes. If the perpetrator collected even 3 months of Sandra's $800 rent, that is $2,400. Before the scheme collapsed, the charge escalates to a third-degree felony in Pennsylvania. That carries a sentence of up to 7 years in state prison. And if investigators discover this was not a one-time scam, which these operations almost never are, federal wire fraud charges become available, carrying penalties of up to 20 years per count. The only question is whether police can identify and locate the perpetrator. Now for the Harpers' financial recovery. Hotel costs, truck rental overages, animal boarding fees, lost wages from days they couldn't report to work. These are real, documented damages. And here is the legal reality. The management company, having failed to deliver the contracted property, is liable for consequential damages resulting from that breach. That means a civil lawsuit against the management company, if pursued, would likely result in a judgment covering every dollar this nightmare cost the Harpers. They have receipts. They have a paper trail. That paper trail is worth real money in civil court. Here is the broader lesson this case teaches us. The Harpers' situation resolved relatively quickly, not because the system is efficient, but because they had done everything correctly from the start. Legitimate management company, verified payment channels, documented paper trail. When the crisis hit, they had leverage, and they used it calmly and legally. They called police instead of escalating. They contacted the management company instead of confronting Sandra directly. Every decision they made in those first 24 hours protected their legal position. Sandra's story is the one that stays with me. She did nothing wrong except trust a listing on a social media platform. She paid real money, possibly thousands of dollars over multiple months, for a lease that was never worth the single page it was printed on. Her recourse is limited. A police report for fraud, a small claims action against the fraudster if ever identified and located, and a hope that criminal prosecution produces a restitution order. Statistically, restitution in fraud cases is ordered far more often than it is actually paid. Sandra may never see that money again. Cases like this one are a reminder that rental fraud is not abstract. It doesn't just cost money. It strands families. It separates people from their animals. It delays careers. It traumatizes children who didn't choose any of this. And it works precisely because it exploits the thing we all need most: a safe place to sleep. That is what makes it, in my view, among the most cynical crimes a person can commit. What would you do if you were Sandra? If you'd paid months of rent in good faith and suddenly had nowhere to go? If you are a renter anywhere in the country, here are 3 things you can do right now to protect yourself. First, always verify the property owner through your county's public property records before signing anything. That search is free and takes 5 minutes. Second, never pay rent or a deposit through Zelle, Venmo, or cash to an individual you cannot verify as the deed holder or licensed management company. Third, if a rental price looks significantly below market for the area, treat it as a scam until proven otherwise, because most of the time, it is. I have linked a renter protection checklist in the description below. Share this video with anyone you know who is apartment hunting. It may be the most important share you make this year. And if you want to see what happens when the property manager themselves is the fraudster, collecting rent from 2 tenants simultaneously on the same unit, that case is up next. Subscribe so you don't miss it.